Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today's video is going to be a buyer's guide on the Toyota GR Yaris. Okay, so the idea about this video is to give you a bit of a buyer's guide towards the GR Yaris. It's not like a review. There's plenty of reviews out there that you can go and watch and see, you know, what the car is all about. But I wanted to give you some information if you're considering buying a GR Yaris. When you're looking to buy one, there's two different models really. You've got the circuit pack and you've got the comfort or convenience pack. So if you look on Auto Trader, there's loads of circuit packs, which is for me the go-to model, but there is this convenience pack, which is not actually this car. I don't know what I'm pointing to it, but basically the convenience pack gives you a few more sort of home comforts. You get like the 360-degree parking sensors, you get a better sound system and navigation, etc. But this is the more raw, rugged driver's car, as it were. It's got different differentials, it's got 10-spoke alloys, it's got the red calipers, it's got extra cooling in the bumper, so you've got cooling ducts there for the brakes, you've got extra cooling for the oil radiators, and it's all round a bit more of a driver's car, like I say. Because it is relatively modern, you know, this car or the GR Yaris, they came out in 2020, so they're not an old car, so there's not huge amounts of things to go through in terms of like problems. They've got their little quirks and they've got their little niggles, but we'll go through those shortly. But I'll start with the general buying, you know, what to look out for if you turn up on someone's drive or you turn up at a dealer, what to look out for. So general wear and tear we'll start with. So as for any performance car, you want to check, see if it's got any obvious signs of the car being on track. So you can go around the tyres, you can go around the brakes, check out what tread's left on the tyres. It's always good to turn the wheel, have a good look on the inside edges of the wheel and also of the tyre, sorry, and look at the tread pattern as well and make sure there's no like big lumps of, you know, rubber that has all got hot and been, you know, obviously been on a track. The brakes on these cars, so front discs particularly, they are quite an expensive part to replace. This car has got about 16,000 miles on it, and I know that we've just ordered some pads for it. So you can get through, look through the wheels, look through the spokes on the wheels, and you can check the depth of the pad. You can see it quite easily, and you can also check the lip of the disc. Okay, so the next thing you want to check is the bodywork. So these cars, they don't come in a load of colours, but they're 4 different colours. You've got the black, white, pearl white and a red. What we find through the car sales company is that the red and the black are very popular. The whites are great cars, great colours, but basically the pearl white probably gets a little bit more of a premium than the flat white. We find the flat white is a little bit harder to sell. But anyway, general stuff on the bodywork, usual stuff really. You want to check for front end stone chip damage. A lot of these cars are getting PPF now, so if you look at the corner of the panels, you can see just tiny like little, well, where the PPF is on the car. So this car has actually got PPF on the bonnet and the wings. So that's obviously a great thing to buy a car with it already installed, because one, it's protected the paintwork underneath, and two, you won't have that expense of installing it. I guess on a car of this size, front end PPF, you could probably expect to pay around £1,500 for a PPF job, something like that. So yeah, check for stone chips, check all the panel gaps. A good thing to do is if you're looking at like bonnets, wings, door edges, just check there's like an even parallel panel gap down the side of the cars, down the joints, and that'll give you a good indication if stuff is lining up, like bonnet to wing gaps, and just feel it, just make sure it's flush. Just because it's like a hot hatch, you know, sometimes these cars do see a little bit of action, track and on the road, so it's something good to look out for. The other thing is, it's quite a wide flared car, so naturally the wide rear quarters you could see that could get peppered, especially if the car's got wider wheels on it. Just check the bodywork around this area here. It's always quite a high impact area. Okay, so obviously from a buyer's point of view, when you go to look at the car, it's always good to pop the bonnet, have a look under the engine bay. Something I always check is obviously relating to the crash damage, is just have a good look down on the front chassis legs. So you've obviously got a chassis leg either side of the engine, and you can just about see them from here. I always like to have a good look, make sure they look in keeping with the condition of the car. So i.e., they're not brand new and they're not just been freshly painted, and there's no new components being bolted onto it nearby. So for example, if it had a big bang, you'd maybe see a little crease in the chassis leg and potentially like new radiators and stuff up front. So you can see all that from above. Just have a good look around, make sure nothing obvious stands out, and then just check the levels. You know, you can check the water, you can check the oil, you can have a good look around, make sure everything looks in place. So these engines, they're great little engines for what they are. They're a 3-cylinder 1.6 turbocharged engine producing 257 brake horsepower, which is quite a lot in standard form for a little 3-cylinder. But as you know, these cars are now becoming really popular with the tuners, and we're doing modifications ourselves as well as other reputable companies. It's always good to basically know the modifications of a car, so you can see how highly strung it is and how it's actually been put together. So for example, if it's got the correct parts on it, good quality parts, and if it has been remapped, for example, there's different options to tune these cars. There's anything from a plug-in little box, which I wouldn't recommend, to be honest, because we've seen those cars come in. So like a tuning chip box it is essentially, which were bought out in the early days when you couldn't access like the ECU and there wasn't any aftermarket ECUs available for it. So I would advise against one of those, to be honest, in terms of keeping it on the car. If it's on there, fine, you can always remove it quite simply. But what we have found with those is basically we've put cars on the dyno and they've actually produced less horsepower than standard. So I don't really like those. But now, like I say, you can tune the ECU, so we tune the ECU off of stage 1, stage 2s. As long as it's done by a reputable company and you've got a receipt for it, then you're probably okay with that, because it's not pushing the car past its, past its safety margin. These engines, they're good for sort of 400 horsepower before you have to get inside them and start forging them. A couple of things you would do if you're getting into modifying and going up to that power. I can go into that in another video when we talk about tuning one of these, but basically I would say you're safe on a stage 2 car without any internal modifications. So something to look out for when test driving the car or just feeling the car, you know, in standard stationary form, you can just drive it backwards and forwards, it's the clutch. So these cars do have a dual mass flywheel, and these earlier phase 1 cars are all manual. So basically there's not loads of mechanical problems we've come across really with these cars, but one thing is the clutch. They're not that common because, like I say, the cars are still quite new, the mileage is still relatively low, but we have come across a couple that have had a dual mass flywheel where they get worn, they get play, and you start feeling a bit of vibration through the car. So that is one thing we have done on these. If you're buying a car that's just slightly older, slightly higher mileage, then it's always good to have a look at the history, see if it's had a clutch in its past. And if it has had a clutch, what has it had put in it? Is it an upgraded clutch? Is it original with a dual mass flywheel, or have they converted it to a single mass? So that's the only thing really I've come across is clutches, clutch wear, and potential gearbox issues. They are fairly stiff going between first and second and down from second to first when the car is cold. But once it's warmed up, you've done a few miles down the road, that should all disappear and feel fairly smooth and easy to get into gear. Okay, so one thing I would suggest to have a little look at is the underside of the car. So like a lot of the Japanese cars we see, these cars are now getting to a point where I guess the oldest one's probably 5 years old. So what they do tend to do is rust relatively quickly. The mechanical components, like obviously diffs and gearbox and stuff, that's fine. It's just the bolt-on steel components like subframes, spring, suspension arms, that sort of thing. They do just start building up a little bit of surface rust, and we're starting seeing it on the chassis of the car as well, because they come with a limited amount of underseal on them as standard. So we've put a few now through Auto Torque where we've actually washed the car off, given it our hot wash process and clear wax underseal. So it's always good to do that. I mean, it's very unlikely that potentially a car you're buying has had that process done, but it's something to probably consider when buying a car. Is the cost for that. So if you have there's only so much you can do when you're on the forecourt of a garage looking to buying one of these, but get on your hands and knees, look under the rear bumper and try and have a look at the suspension, the rear chassis, the rear subframe, and any mechanical component underneath, just to see if there's a build-up of rust, because depending on where it's been in the country and how it's been treated, then it will vary quite a lot on these. So yeah, something maybe to consider. Have a look at our other video. We've done some videos on these cars on the underside protection, so it shows our whole process from hot washing the car to giving it a clear wax process. So have a little look at that, and that could be something you could consider as one of the modifications you do when you buy one of these, if it hasn't already been done. So something to consider when buying one of these cars is whether you want a standard car or whether you want a modified car. So I guess the consideration would be probably down to warranty side of things, depending on what age of car you get. But these cars came out in 2020, and they originally came with a 5-year warranty. I think now the later cars, if it's built after 21, then they come with a 3-year manufacturer warranty with the option to extend it. So if you have a standard car and you get it serviced by a Toyota approved garage, they add an additional year warranty on every year. So basically, you need to get it serviced at Toyota, and it needs to be stock to add that warranty on. So it goes up to, you can have a maximum of 10-year warranty on these cars. So which is quite nice. You know, if you don't want to modify the car, if you want that peace of mind of reliability, and that's a very good thing to consider. So check the service history. If the car has been serviced elsewhere than Toyota, then it's probably going to void that warranty, and you probably won't be able to extend it if it's been serviced elsewhere. But generally speaking, if you get a car serviced by a reputable specialist that's VAT registered, then if it's still in the main manufacturer's warranty, then you'll be able to claim off that. So I wouldn't let that put you off too much. The general rule is any performance modification is going to void your warranty. So obviously there's light modifications you can do, which are obviously reversible. For example, this car's got a nice Venturi intake on it. It's got an exhaust system on it, which is all reversible. You know, if you did have a problem, you could potentially put it back to stock and then get it back in for warranty work. Okay, so we're going to take the Yaris out on the road, give it a little test drive. As if I was buying a car, what would I look for? So ideally try and get it test driven from cold, so you can see obviously the temperature needle go from cold to midway. You don't want to see it move further than midway on an ideal situation. Obviously after that, then you've got some overheating issues. But basically, see what the gearbox feels like transmission wise, listen out for noises. So like I mentioned earlier, between first and second and down from second to first, it's sometimes a little bit stiff, but that's absolutely normal. This car's been driven now for a little while, so it's absolutely silky smooth. No graunchiness, no resistance, feels absolutely perfect. So that's what you want to feel. And clutch engagement as well, check the pedal height. You don't want the pedal engaging like right at the top of the pedal, because then that's obviously a sign of wear as well. And then try and, you know, go over some country lanes, undulated roads, and just see what the suspension feels like. Make sure there's no knocking. You can hear that beeping. Basically, these cars have got a lane assist on them, which is highly irritating. But it's obviously a modern day car, and that's what they have to do on these cars, put these in place. So to stop that beeping, because I'm just weaving in and out of traffic and going across the white line. So top right of the steering wheel, you'll see the button for the lane assist. So just press and hold that for 3 seconds, and it disappears off the dash, and then you can cross a white line without it causing you any issues. So I'm just heading out of the village and going into a little nice country B road, and just going to give it a test through the gears, rev it out. You don't need to go wild, you just need to make sure it revs clean, the engine's not making any funny noises, and it's not down on power basically, or misfiring. It's good to go up and down the gearbox, listen for any whines. It's good to accelerate and then lift off. And you could, because it's obviously quite a mechanical car, it's got a transfer box, it's got rear diff, and they can make noises if they're worn. This car's got an aftermarket exhaust, so it's quite loud. Hopefully you can hear me over it, but do a couple of pulls in different gears, try and get through the rev range, and also try the brakes out. Make sure there's no vibration, and they're all, you know, not vibrating through the pedal or the steering wheel, because that would be signs of brake wear or brake warping. Make sure the geometry is set up correctly. These cars are very sensitive, and they always do, you know, they are quite affected by the wheel alignment. It's always good to get that done once a year. I'd always suggest it in a service, to be honest, especially with our UK roads and the condition they're in. it's always good to get them checked, because like I say, they are very sensitive. There's obviously only a certain amount of testing you can do on a test drive. You probably have someone sat next to you, and you obviously don't want to go wild and frighten the guy sat next to you. So basically it's just a good feel, get a good feel for the car. Like I say, I've said it before in the video, they're a modern day car, they're relatively low mileage still. Even the higher mileage ones you'll find at 30k, you know, they should still feel tight, you shouldn't have any nasty noises, engine should feel crisp. It's mainly the wear and tear items you should be checking out, so it's brakes, it's clutch, and really just get a feel for the car. Make sure you're happy with it, and make sure it's the car for you as well, because you are test driving it to see if it's something you like and want to live with, basically. Service history, you want to make sure this car is up to service spec, so essentially it's had a service once a year or every sort of 10-12,000 miles. It should have a stamp in the book. As long as that's been done at a reputable dealer or a specialist using the correct oils, you should be safe. And obviously it's always good for resale value to make sure the car is up to standard on the service history. If it's missing one or it's done a load of miles without having a stamp, then obviously that's a bit of a warning sign. I'd always recommend making sure the service history is up to date. So I think that concludes the video really. We've gone through all the obvious stuff, some of the specialist stuff, and yeah, just get out in the car, have a good look around it, and just make sure it's the car for you, essentially, and make sure it's mechanically sound. If you do want to get the car checked out by a specialist, that's always a good thing to do. So someone like ourselves, you can give us a ring up, you could always send us the advert, we'll have a look at the car, we'll have a look at the advert and see if anything stands out. Also, something I'd recommend, if the seller would allow, is to actually get the car inspected by a specialist. So you could ask them to bring the car to us, we could do like an hour's inspection, do a health test on the engine, get it up in the air, you know, some of the bits you obviously aren't going to be able to see when you're viewing the car on the ground. So it's always worthwhile asking if you can get that inspection done by a specialist, just for peace of mind. But yeah, no, I think that concludes it. I've said everything I know about these cars really. Like I say, they're great fun. I would always highly recommend getting in one. If it's always been on your list of cars to, you know, to get, I would always say scratch that itch, get a GR Yaris. So yeah, any comments below. If you need any more information, like I say, you can pick up the phone and drop a comment below. But yeah, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.